Welcome, friends. You're watching the Ruslan Belov channel, and today, May 6th, 2026, we're breaking down one of the most event-packed days in recent weeks. The number of significant map changes is such that a detailed analysis is absolutely necessary. Today we'll be covering the continuation of Russian advances across multiple sectors of the Ukrainian front, the encirclement of an AFU grouping north of Lyman, the rapidly evolving situation in Constantinovka, a large-scale offensive on the Zaporizhzhia sector, and of course critically important developments in the Middle East, the fate of the Strait of Hormuz, US-Iran negotiations, and what really lies behind the announcement of the end of Operation Epic Fury. But before we begin, just 30 seconds of your attention. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so right now. Hit the bell icon and select all notifications. This isn't just a formality. YouTube actively suppresses the reach of content related to military analysis and geopolitics. The platform's algorithm works in such a way that a significant portion of the audience simply doesn't receive notifications about new uploads, even if you've been subscribed for a long time. Every like, every subscription, every bell enabled is direct support for the channel that allows us to keep this work going. A special thank you to everyone supporting us through super thanks and channel memberships. You make these episodes possible. Now, let's get into it. Sumy sector. We start in the north, on the Sumy sector, where Russian forces are methodically continuing to straighten and expand the front line east of Krasnopilya. This sector has been drawing particular attention from military analysts over the past 3 days, and for good reason. The key events have been unfolding around the settlement of Ryazne. According to the latest data confirmed by independent sources, Russian units have established control over at least 70% of this settlement, and by some analysts' assessments, potentially more. The front line in this sector currently runs along a quadrilateral between Ryazne, Taratutyne, Novoalexandrivka, and Pokrovka. This is a bridgehead that Russian forces have been building over the course of several days, gradually pushing Ukrainian units out and occupying commanding positions. What does this mean operationally? Between these 4 settlements, a bridgehead has been established from which a logical path forward opens toward Krasnopilya. This city carries strategic weight. It is large enough, has the necessary infrastructure, and if brought under control, would allow the Russian side to concentrate brigade-level forces in this direction. That, in turn, creates the conditions to push further, in a northwesterly direction, toward the southeastern outskirts of Sumy. A scenario that just a few months ago seemed a distant prospect is today coming into sharper and sharper focus. Kharkiv direction. Moving on to the Kharkiv sector, where elevated activity has also been recorded. Events on this direction are developing at several points simultaneously, leaving no room to speak of any kind of lull. In the area of the settlement of Veterinan, Russian units continue to expand their bridgehead. Drone footage has been published that directly confirms the advance. This is not rumor or press service statements, but documented fact. At the same time, heightened activity from Russian FPV drone operators is being recorded in the areas of Huriv-Kozachok and Odnorobivka. This is an indicator that intensive aerial reconnaissance is underway in this sector, along with fire suppression of Ukrainian positions. This kind of activity pattern typically precedes offensive action. It is quite possible that in the near term, the Russian side intends to resume pressure here, with the aim of expanding its zone of control southward, towards Zolochiv and Kozacha-Lopan. In the northeast of the Kharkiv direction, small but telling map corrections have been recorded around the eastern outskirts of Budarka. All of them are based on analysis of drone footage. The video materials show both Russian unit movements and strikes by the AFU against their positions. The situation in this sector continues to shift, and it is entirely plausible that the Russian Ministry of Defense will officially confirm an advance in this area in the near future. Lyman direction, the cauldron north of Lyman. Now, one of the most significant pieces of news of the day, which is also reflected in the title of this episode. North of Lyman, part of an AFU grouping has found itself encircled. Let's break the situation down in detail, without exaggeration. Speaking to the exact headcount of the encircled unit is difficult. We are talking about dozens of servicemen, possibly more, but no specific confirmed figures are available at this point. it's important to understand that the front line in this area, as everywhere, is not a solid wall. There are no continuous trenches, no reinforced defensive lines with wire obstacles. Nevertheless, it was precisely the absence of a clear boundary that allowed Russian units to conduct infiltration and establish control over a key field between several tree lines. That field, geometrically speaking, became the point that severed the supply line to Ukrainian positions in this sector. Russian presence has been confirmed in Stavki, and the penetration from the direction of Drobyshchev had been occurring for some time. And now, today, the situation has taken on the shape of a partial encirclement. The ring is loose, escape routes are not fully sealed, but the trapped units are under fire and cut off from regular resupply. Strategically, this is an extremely unfavorable position for the defending side. Sloviansk direction. Significant developments have also been recorded today on the Sloviansk direction. Fighting continues both in the immediate vicinity of Lyman itself and east of Sloviansk, around the settlement of Kriva Luka. Yesterday, footage was published from the northeastern part of Piskunivka. Russian servicemen are clearly visible raising a flag. Today, information is coming in that fighting has moved beyond the approaches to Kriva Luka and is now being conducted within the settlement itself. To recap, the encirclement of Kriva Luka was completed several days ago, and since then, Russian forces have been systematically clearing its blocks. The process is active. It appears that AFU resistance within the settlement is diminishing as their tactical position worsens. Constantinovka sector. Constantinovka is another hotspot of the day, and here the numbers speak for themselves. As of the evening of May 5th, the Russian side controlled approximately 28% of the city's area. By the end of May 6th, that figure has confidently crossed the 29% mark. And when accounting for grey zones and infiltration areas, we can reasonably speak of 30,031%. In parallel, May 6th saw a significant volume of material published related to Russian aviation airstrikes on Druzhkivka and Kramatorsk. The footage shows the destruction of large warehouse facilities, presumably containing weapons or ammunition. If confirmed, these strikes dealt a meaningful blow to AFU logistics on this operational axis. As for the urban combat inside Konstantinivka itself, activity is concentrated primarily in the western and southwestern parts of the city, in particular in the Promyslovy district. This is where, based on the latest map corrections from neutral and pro-Russian mappers, as well as footage of AFU FPV operators targeting forward Russian positions, the most intense advance is underway. The rate of progress, roughly 1% of the city's area per day, is not record-breaking, but it is steady and uninterrupted. If this tempo holds, Konstantinivka risks changing hands within the next few weeks. Dobropilya sector, a broad front offensive. And now, arguably the most operationally significant development of the day. On the Dobropilya sector, a large-scale Russian offensive has been recorded across a broad front in the corridor between Dobropilya and Druzhkivka. Russian units are advancing along routes that were already being tracked back in August 2025, when this direction unexpectedly came alive and drew widespread attention. At that point, the offensive was impulsive in character. Today, according to assessments from both neutral and pro-Russian mapping services, we are dealing with an organized offensive that clearly involves significantly larger forces and assets. At the specific level, the Russian side has improved positions around Stepi, and the settlement of Kucherov Yar has been placed in a semi-encirclement. Russian units are closing the distance to Hrushky and Malonovo-Nikolaivka. The strategic objective of this offensive is sufficiently clear to anyone familiar with the map of this theater: to drive a wedge between the defensive nodes of Dobropilya and Druzhkivka, and to reach the T-0514 highway. That road is currently one of the key supply arteries for Ukrainian groupings in the central and western Donetsk region, linking Druzhkivka, Kramatorsk, Konstantinivka, and Dobropilya. Should Russian forces manage to advance northward and sever, or credibly threaten to sever, this corridor, they gain leverage over an entire operational node. And critically, they would emerge into the rear area of the AFU groupings operating near Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. This offensive deserves the closest possible attention in the days ahead. Zaporizhzhia direction. A few words on Zaporizhzhia. In the early hours of May 6th, the city came under massive strikes, with significant destruction recorded. At the same time, the picture emerging from movement data is telling. Along highways M18 and H08, active redeployment of Ukrainian military equipment has been observed in the direction of the western Zaporizhzhia front. It appears that the Ukrainian side is drawing in reinforcements to sustain pressure towards Stepnohirsk and Kamyanske. No significant territorial changes have been recorded yet, but the movement of forces itself speaks to AFU command intentions on this sector. On the eastern Zaporizhzhia axis, a different picture is emerging. A map correction has been recorded around the eastern outskirts of Vozdvizhenka. Russian forces have closed to within immediate proximity of the settlement from the east. May 6th saw the first drone footage published confirming Russian unit presence in the direct vicinity of Vozdvizhenka. This is a significant moment. As a rule, once confirming footage appears, it tends to be followed by a wave of additional map corrections. We are watching this direction closely. Middle East, the Strait of Hormuz, the world's nerve, and finally, the Middle East, where the events of May 6th have taken on a genuinely global dimension. Let's start with the context. Since February 28, 2026, following the death of Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei in US and Israeli strikes, Iran has effectively blockaded the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow but critically important waterway, roughly 54 kilometers wide, through which until recently approximately 25% of the world's seaborne oil trade and around 20% of global LNG passed. Tanker traffic in the first weeks of the blockade fell by roughly 70%, then to near zero. More than 150 vessels anchored outside the strait, waiting for a resolution. The blow to the world economy was immediate. According to World Bank estimates, global commodity prices in 2026 risk rising by 16%, with energy costs up by more than 24%, which would be a record since the outbreak of the Ukraine conflict. On May 4th, Washington launched Operation Project Freedom, a large-scale naval mission involving up to 15,000 personnel, guided missile ships, aviation, and unmanned systems. Its objective, to safely escort civilian vessels from 87 countries out of the Persian Gulf, where they have been effectively held hostage. The first results came quickly. The Maersk vessel Alliance Fairfax, which had been stranded in the Gulf since early February, was escorted through the strait under the protection of U.S. forces. The U.S. Navy has also intercepted at least 50 Iran-linked commercial vessels since the start of the blockade, while Seahawk and Apache helicopters destroyed several Iranian military fast boats that were threatening commercial shipping. Iran responded in kind. The Tasnim agency reported a missile strike on a U.S. military vessel, which reportedly sustained damage and was forced to withdraw from the area. On May 5th, Iran announced the introduction of a new passage system for the strait. Ship captains are now required to notify Iranian authorities in advance, obtain an electronic permit, and confirm their agreement to comply with the transit rules set by Tehran. In practical terms, this is an attempt to formalize unilateral Iranian regulation of an international waterway, which directly contradicts the norms of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. But in the heat of an active conflict, international legal norms, as we know, tend to take a back seat. Now, the negotiations. As of the evening of May 6th, the US and Iran are genuinely in an advanced stage of talks toward a deal. The contours of the agreement as outlined by the American side look like this. Iran commits to halting uranium enrichment, the US lifts the sanctions regime and unfreezes significant Iranian assets, and both sides guarantee safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf. Marco Rubio today announced the conclusion of Operation Epic Fury. At a meeting with the commander of the Middle East direction, an official announcement was made, which immediately moved markets. WTI crude oil fell below the $80 per barrel mark by the close of the day. However, an important caveat is necessary here. All of these statements about the imminent deal have come exclusively from the American side. Iran's response remains ambiguous. According to independent analysts, even if an agreement is reached, shipping through the strait will not return to pre-war volumes before the end of 2026. The accumulated logistical disruption is simply too deep. Complicating matters further, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has outlined three possible scenarios for how events may develop, and even under the most favorable of them, immediate removal of all restrictions, the world economy will inevitably face slower growth, rising inflation, and months of supply chain recovery. Trump, for his part, has sent a clear signal. If Tehran rejects the terms of the agreement, the United States will resume its bombing campaign with greater intensity than anything Iran has experienced so far. The ball, then, is in Iran's court. How far Tehran is willing to go in conceding on its nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief and asset unfreezing will become clear in the days ahead. We are watching closely. That brings today's analysis to a close. Thank you for watching, for your comments, your likes, and your continued support. If you found this episode useful, please leave a like and share it with anyone who follows objective military analysis. Take care and see you in the next episode.